welcome to another Jack's tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to install Linux Mint into a VirtualBox using Oracle's VirtualBox. So first we'll select Ubuntu and make it Linux and make it an Ubuntu 64-bit because that's what Linux Mint is based on. We'll select how much RAM we want to give the machine, and then we'll name it Virtual Mint. Okay, so here on this page we're selecting the hard drive size, and I've made mine 20 gigabytes because that's how much space I figured I'd end up using. You can make it whatever size you have available to you. It just goes into a virtual file on your hard drive wherever you select to put it. Okay, so that's the virtual machine created. Now we're just going to go in and edit some of the settings. So there are a few settings. In here you can type a description if you want, for your own personal benefit only. So here I set the processor amount to 4, purely because I know I have 4 processors in my actual host machine, so I figure I'll use them all. Set the video memory as high as possible. And I didn't enable 2D or 3D acceleration because I wasn't sure whether or not my motherboard supported them. Okay, at this point here I bridge my wireless network card across to the virtual machine. Just makes it so I can access the internet within the virtual machine. And I think that's pretty much all the settings. Oh, and of course you've got to change the boot order. I don't have a floppy disk, so I disabled it. Set the hard drive as the primary boot device, followed by the CD drive, which is a virtual drive. Okay, at this point I select the virtual machine we've just created and boot it up. So you'll be greeted by this particular screen. It's where you select the particular boot media that you want to put into the virtual drive. So in my downloads folder in Windows here I selected my Linux Mint 64-bit distribution that I downloaded. And just clicked OK. So you'll be greeted by the Linux Mint system itself. Just hit enter a few times and you should be eventually greeted by the Virtual Mint desktop. Sorry, the Linux Mint Maya desktop in a virtual machine. Now occasionally some people might get an error code here. That's because it's inside a virtual machine and actually can't see the physical RAM. I just ignored it, didn't seem to cause me any problems. Might have to reboot the machine a few times to get it to work, I don't know. Okay, so we're just waiting for the desktop to boot. Should be up in about 30 seconds. There we go. Okay, so this is Linux Mint in its testing disk. It's as it would ship if you had booted it from a CD, but we booted it from an ISO file. Okay, so this is how we begin the install process. It's on the desktop there. If you want, you can have an explore around Linux Mint and decide if you do actually want to go ahead with this or not. It's not compulsory to install, but I like to have it installed so I have all the username and logins and all of that. And it means I don't have to mount the ISO file every time I log in. Okay, so here we go, we're greeted by the install wizard. I'm going to install in English because it's a language that I speak. So this will just confirm that we have access to the internet, that there's a hard drive present, which there isn't, but it's a virtual file. And I'll select to a completely new install, so it'll wipe everything on the virtual disk, which is nothing at the moment, and install the next internet. And as you can see, the only hard drive available to this virtual machine is the virtual disk we created and set up, which is 21.5 gigabytes large. Okay, we'll just continue with the install wizard here. Okay, and finally you're greeted with this screen, choosing your time zone. As you can probably tell, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so I chose that time zone. The keyboard layout is this selection. At first I thought it was a language selection, so I instantly chose English UK because that's what I speak, but then I realised it was actually keyboard selection, so I went back to English US. And there's also an option to go through and test which keyboard you have by following through this little wizard here. Thought I'd show you because it's a nifty little tool. So as I said before, it's basically a little wizard that asks you questions about your keyboard. Here you can see are these keys present on the keyboard, and that'll determine what type of keyboard you actually have. And here for some reason I think my graphics drivers might have stuffed up a little bit, so it went black for a second. Fixed itself eventually. There we go. And in that little text box there you can type to test your keyboard. I just typed the word hello just to make sure I had the right keyboard set up. Okay, just continuing with the install now. And it'll ask you for your name, a username and password, and the name of the computer. Now I put the name in as Jax. You can put whatever you want essentially, but it is who the software will be registered to, if you choose to register it. Okay, so I called my particular machine Virtual Mint because I can see it on my network as Virtual Mint and I know what it is. You can call it whatever you want. I put in Jax as the username, and the password I've chosen I'm obviously not going to reveal to you guys. It can be anything you want. Okay, and that begins the install process. It takes about 20 minutes from this point, but I've just left this screen up here just to show you where it is. It'll play a little slideshow introducing you to the whole Linux Mint. And eventually when the install process finishes, you'll be greeted by this particular text box. It takes about 20 minutes, so by all means get up, get yourself a cup of coffee. And at this point I chose to restart the machine now because there was no use staying in testing mode or in CD mode. Now this took a hell of a lot of time, so in the end I decided to do a hard reset of the virtual machine. I was sitting there waiting for about 10 minutes. So the way to do a hard reset of a virtual machine in VirtualBox is to go up to the menu at the top which says Machine. Click it, and then scroll down to the reset, click it. Now what that does is effectively the same as if it was a hardware based machine and pressing the reset button on the front of the computer, or shorting the jumpers on the motherboard. So the reset process in this way took a little while as well, but it was a hell of a lot faster than waiting another 20 minutes, which I've experienced in the past after the first install. Ideally you shouldn't have to do it this way, but I just got sick of waiting, so I did it this way. So eventually the machine restarts. As you can see, it goes blank, and you're greeted by this Linux Mint login screen. Very similar to the OS X login screen if anybody's ever seen it. So you just put in your username, password, hit enter, and then you'll hear a little tone like that, kind of happy greeting sound, and it'll take a few seconds to log in. As we're working in a virtual machine, we kind of expect it to be a little laggy. Okay, and here's the Linux Mint desktop as it starts to boot up. Down in the bottom corner you've got what's very similar to the start menu in Windows, and that little white square you can see in the center there is similar to the tips of the day sort of a thing. It'll boot up eventually and I'll talk you through it when it does. Okay, so here's our little splash screen thing that starts up the first time you start Linux Mint, and if you don't select the checkbox down the bottom, it starts up every single other time. So it's basically a whole lot of links to their forums, their websites, a whole lot of info about Linux Mint. Feel free to explore those links if you want. I chose not to because I prefer to just experience firsthand. If I have a problem, I Google it. Much like anybody else, really. So yeah, I chose to disable that splash screen on login and close it. So to shut down the virtual Mint machine, it's much as similar as Windows. You just click up down, you're prompted are you sure, and you just click shut down now. And the machine shut itself down. You'll receive a few little prompts saying it's closing down certain services. And eventually you'll be re-greeted by the VirtualBox console. And we're back in Windows again. So that's pretty much the install process of Linux Mint. In the next series that I do, I'll take you through a few little quirks of Linux Mint that I found enjoyable. Maybe install a bit of software, take you around the apt-get software. Thanks for watching, guys, and feel free to drop a comment if you have any comments. That'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys.